So thank you everybody to this panel session. Indeed, the topic is how will multimodal LLMs shape industry and society? But we made a survey, so we have a set of questions that all of you have vote and rate. So we will take those questions as the basis. And let me introduce the panelists. The first is Professor Christina Jokinen, a professor of the University of Helsinki, who gave her keynote yesterday. So she's professor at the University of Helsinki and also senior researcher at AI Research Center at the National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology in Japan. She works on dialogue and also in the European Union in Japan. Her research concerns human-robot interaction, Gen AI-based dialogue modeling, and multimodal communication. So please welcome her. Then we have Kira Ramnath. I'm sure I pronounced it well. He's applied scientist at Amazon Web Services in Silicon Valley, California. He has worked on automatic prompt optimization features on AWS Bedrock. His research interests include agent evaluation, user simulator, multi-agent systems, coding, search agents, diffusion language models. And he worked previously in Salesforce AI on RAG, and he has served as program chair at the first international workshop on prompt optimization in KDD. So welcome. And our next invited panelist is Luciana Benotti. She's member of the NACOL Executive Committee. She leads an AI department in the NGO Fundación Vía Libre, which has been defending digital rights in Latin America. She's associate professor at the University of Córdoba in Argentina, and her work lies at the intersection of natural language processing, human-computer interaction, AI ethics, and multicultural NLP. She's working on assessing the societal impacts of large language models. And she has served as HCL Ethical Chair, Area Chair in Dialogue and Interactive Systems. So welcome, Luciana. So then maybe we can go to the questions. Okay, the most voted question is about the future. What do you think about the future of deep research agents in industry, with the ambiguity of the agent term?
Thank you. Well, I'm a great fan of agents, and I also believe in both agents. That is sort of three-dimensional robot agents and applications that are meant to provide, say, companionship to partners or users. And also the agents that refer to their workflow. I think this is a very interesting and new research topic, either from the point of view of the actual methods that we use for the building better systems, and also from the point of view of society, of having applications that would do good for society. But there are a lot of issues concerning the ethics, for instance, concerning the methodology and technology itself. I don't go into details now. Maybe there are opportunities to talk about those as well. So that I think they have a great opportunity and good promise, but we need to be a little bit more careful without not just embracing them without any criticism.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with like having a cautiously optimistic approach towards embracing them. I think, yeah, definitely this is something that has impacted all of our work. For example, be it management consulting or some scientific project, like the initial few weeks of the project would earlier in the earlier times would be where you had the time to spend on like primary or secondary research. Like you could just like spend some time to understand the area. But I think with research agents that kind of time window has really shrunk. So I think, yeah, that's definitely great in terms of like allowing the humans to actually spend some more time in thinking at a high level and not having to kind of wrestle with the nitty gritties of the area. But at the same time, I agree that, for example, in large companies, there's like so many policy documents, and often like policy documents might even conflict with each other. And you have to take into account the context of so many details, such as like which org do you belong to, because each of the departments might have their own rules and so on. So yeah, I think definitely the rollout of this, I think there's some kind of impediments that need to be like tackled. But yeah, I think having said that, there's probably no going back in terms of like the old way of doing things for like at least the primary research. Yeah.
I wanted to go a bit deeper on the ethical implications of agents, and in particular, I wanted to reflect on the fact on how it affects the privacy and the agency of the people involved in the community interacting with the agents, right? If these systems are acting in the world and making decisions, in particular, what are the implications for the privacy of the people involved and for the biases that these models bring into the decisions that they make and into the actions that they take. Well, as the previous talk was mentioning, to have this human in the loop, what does it mean when interacting with agents? I think these are all challenges that we are facing now when we are giving more capabilities of acting to these models in the world.
Thank you. I would like to follow up about something you mentioned. Since you said now it's very fast, the whole pipeline process is going very fast. Maybe we don't have as humans the time to understand what is going on inside. And is that risky or dangerous for us?
Yeah, I think totally. I think we have this kind of philosophy in our team that, yeah, definitely we should be using AI to accelerate our work. But if something goes out, the human is still responsible. So there have to be kind of systems and processes in organizations or universities to make sure that the human is still like in control. I kind of I remember hearing this very evocative imagery where you don't want a situation where human are like meat robots who just like kind of acting in the real world but being instructed by LLMs. So we have completely outsourced our thinking. So yeah, there definitely needs to be like kind of systematic guardrails and best practices like at the high level as well as like at the individual team level. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree on this, and I think one of the important things is the concept of trust. So we need to have trust in the systems that we build, and building trust is one of the important questions, and very difficult as well, how it's created and how it's maintained. Another thing is that when trust is broken, so it's difficult to gain the trust again. One important thing is, of course, that we need to educate people. We need to be honest about the systems that we build. They have to be somehow transparent, and the decision processes need to be explained and be clear to the users. I'm now thinking especially about users with special needs and say elderly people. who may have problems with seeing, understanding, and sort of getting simple explanations may also kind of a backfire, so that they may not trust anymore on the applications. So what I think is important to try to see the interaction between humans and these AI agents that we build, how they can provide the information that is especially personalized towards the needs of the humans and the needs of the users, and in this way try to build this kind of transparent, ethical, resilient applications.
I just wanted to add something very short about how this affects software development, for instance, because also, apart from my research, I'm a computer science professor, and I see how my students going into industry are using automation more and more. And also they are being expected of being more productive, right? So this gives them less time to review their own code, and they are getting used to maybe not looking in depth in the code because they don't have the time to do it, right? So I think that in the software development industry, this is a problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the next most upvoted question here, which is on performance. So what would be your thoughts on benchmark performance versus real scenarios? I'm thinking that since we are in EMNLP, performance is figures very highly on the agenda.
Yes. Okay. May I start, because I also want to emphasize very much of the real world sort of situations and evaluation in the real world. Yesterday in my key talk, I tried to sort of point out the way how we actually build the applications for sort of say society point of view, and that was a co-creation, so that I think we need to distinguish two things. We can build very fast algorithms, and it's really important that the algorithms themselves work well, and in that case we need to of course use the standard evaluation for those, but when we then want to apply these algorithms and techniques to build some applications which are meant to interact with the humans and do some extra work. So we need to also take the users, the target users into account and see what are the real needs for the people for these technologies. And in that way, we may actually also encounter situations which are not really foreseen when we just focus on the actual technology. But I want to point out also that the going towards applications does not sort of do away the fact that we need to build good technology, because that is the basis for trust. If we can trust that the system works well, so then the building sort of trust with the different types of applications is also guaranteed.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like evaluation is something of a moving target, that as you're building systems, like you kind of obviously cannot do away with benchmarks, but yeah, there's something that you mentioned that all the scenarios cannot be foreseen in advance. So these are like the unknown unknowns. You give the feature or software in the hands of the customer, and you don't really know what kind of scenarios would be thrown at it. So yeah, this is definitely an ongoing theme. And yeah, definitely there is like this kind of fear that some of these benchmarks have just kind of become saturated and have kind of just become too inward looking and may have lost kind of some of the touch with reality as to how exactly the customers are using it. So I guess it's very refreshing to see at EMNLP like a lot of interdisciplinary work still being done, and kind of this term that comes to mind is like jagged intelligence. Like LLMs or agents like seem to be like of superhuman capabilities when it comes to a lot of the things, but they might have these kind of weird cliffs in their performance where you least expect them. So yeah, I feel like in the industry you need like very good observability systems that allow like full tracing and full visibility into like the thinking and the actions that the LLMs take in the systems that are deployed. Yeah.
Well, I think these are very good points, and as you said, evaluation is a moving target. What I wanted to add to this is that benchmarks for a long time have been very useful, but what worries me more from benchmarks, apart from the fact that many times they are just one-turn evaluations, sometimes are like multiple choice, and when people use LLMs, they don't ask, please answer A, B, C, and D, right? So this is kind of artificial. But something else is who is producing these benchmarks, right? So in many of the benchmarks that we use have been crowdsourced. And one of the problems that I see there is that when we crowdsource the benchmarks, the people that get the instructions to give the data have a very partial picture of what the researcher is trying to do there. And in fact, many times it's not the biases of the crowd workers themselves, the ones that are reflected in the benchmark, but the biases of the designers of the data collection, right? So a way to make this, to improve this, is to have benchmarks that are collected together with people that are more involved in the creation of the benchmarks, in the creation of the guidelines, in understanding what the task is, so that they can give feedback. To just tell you an anecdote, I had a friend that was working on speech, and he said, oh, every time I'm uploading this data point, the system is out of memory. And the thing is that he was just uploading a speech, 30-second speech, but this was a 30-minute speech. It seems that the crowd worker had not stopped the recording. And then she was complaining, these people think I'm stupid. They are always asking me for the same task. I don't know what I'm doing here, you know? And so this lack of purpose on the construction of benchmarks is a problem. And in this sense, my team and I, we've been working on involving people for a longer term to build a benchmark. And last year we had a project of 6 months working with people creating a benchmark on stereotypes for a particular domain. But I think that the area should move into building better benchmarks.
Okay, I think it's great because precisely the next question regards the bias. What are your thoughts about LLM as a judge and biases? So I think it's a follow-up question regarding what Luciana just said. You want to start? Oh, okay.
And here, when I was thinking about this question, I also thought about another example. Yesterday, I was in the business meeting. I don't know if you attended the business meeting of EMNLP, that all members of ACL are invited to it. If you didn't know, now you know, for next conference. And there was one proposal on how to improve the review process, and it was to have automatic feedback from LLMs on reviews to know whether the review is good or bad. Right, and there could be advantages to that, but I started, since I've been working on ethics, I started thinking about the biases of that, right? And for instance, some examples I wanted to bring is that For that task in particular, I don't know of work that has studied biases, but there are other tasks. Like for instance, there is this task to try to detect whether a text was generated or not by an LLM. Like for instance, DetectGPT is a tool that does this. And these tools have many errors, right? This is a really hard task to detect whether something has been or not generated by an LLM. And in particular, something that has been studied is that it discriminates people that are not native speakers. So I was thinking whether this bias could also impact the reviews written by people that are not native English speakers. On the other hand, I was thinking about temporal bias. So if you fine-tune, let's say, an LLM on all reviews, then all criteria will get into the future, and do we want that or not? And then I was thinking about emergent bias. For instance, if this is trained for conferences that focus more on English benchmarks, and then you apply this to AACL, some conference that focuses more on other languages, whether that is going to impact the ratings and the feedback that the LLM gives, right? So I think that the biases depend a lot on the domain of application, but we need to think carefully on what are the biases that are going to emerge in that particular.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with what Professor just said. Empirically, I think what I have observed is that I think in the beginning we kind of seen like different biases like position bias, verbosity bias, and so on, which I feel like the LLM field has really worked to catch up on. And so those kind of like low-hanging fruits of mitigating those biases, it seems like the frontier models are kind of good at that. But I think, yeah, the fear is that some of the more kind of difficult to spot biases may still be lurking out there, such as the ones that you just mentioned, where like it may be difficult for even humans to spot at first glance whether is there a bias or is there the LLM's decision making is correct or not. And I feel like such kind of cases will always kind of require this proactive upfront thinking to just kind of keep enumerating all the different cases in which things could go wrong. And yeah, this is definitely, I feel like there's no easy way out. Yeah, we just have to keep evaluating and manually to make sure that yeah, the different biases that could emerge, there's no regression and so on. So yeah, there's definitely something that we have to constantly keep tracking, I feel.
Yes, I completely agree with what you have already talked about and mentioned. So I like to point out that actually we tend to think that bias is a very bad thing, but we as humans actually are very biased in our everyday life. And that is one of the things how we can actually act very quickly, and we can do things which otherwise would require a lot of thinking time. So that in fact, some of the biases that we favor something in order to produce something which is good for us in a particular situation is not necessarily good, but it's something which is practical or rational. And I think one solution to this bias thing is that we may never actually agree and be able to build some kind of a general AI that is good for all, and we can't build tasks and data that would be good for all the tasks we have in mind. I think there is a good thing to think about personalized situations and being more aware of where we want to build the system, what kind of task we wanted to work on, for whom it's targeted, etc., and be kind of open and transparent about what kind of work we have used. So in this case, I also want want to emphasize the transparency of building the applications, collecting data, and also the fact that we may in the future actually want to use more personalized sort of applications, and that kind of being able to understand what are the other people's viewpoints. Biases may be just that you simply like red colors and the other one like blue colors, and you want to have different sort of realizations of the results, or your personal history is different, so you want the system to be able to understand your special needs. So those things are important to take into account, how we can actually use the bias not just to eliminate it, because that bias is just something that we have to live by in our everyday life.
Before going to the next question, I want to ask, following on this theme, to all of you, but I agree that bias is part of us. I mean, we are all biased, but maybe if we include, we are inclusive since the whole process of data collection, the whole pipeline until the creation of benchmarks, and we include different cultures, or I don't know, or diversity in there. Maybe, I mean, we will not eliminate the bias at all, but maybe we are more inclusive. So
yes. It's an interesting thing how, or can we eliminate our bias, and how much we actually kind of include it more in the work we do. Maybe one of the things is to be how would I say, have more open view of what are the actual aspects that we sort of want to focus on. And as Luciana mentioned about how important it is to include all the people in the sort of co-creative process of building even the data, not to mention about different applications. So through that kind of joint effort where we bring our own biases and are on the stake, and we talk about them openly, maybe that would also be some good step, not to evaluate or eliminate them, but be the community aware of what kind of aspects there are that we need to pay attention to, and especially take into account when building the data.
Yeah, so I have a colleague that says that we don't want, I mean, it's not possible to erase all biases, that we don't want to remove bias, but to multiply it, right? What a language model, it's kind of counterintuitive. So what a language model does somehow is to unify the bias, and that's what's problematic. If the bias is always the same people are getting a bad treatment, are being discriminated. It's a systematic decision that is applied to a particular group of people. So in order to be able, so what you were saying, Christina, that we all have biases, that's true, but we all have different biases, right? The problem with language models is, especially if we use only a couple of language models, is that they always apply the same bias. they are non-deterministic, so hopefully they will not apply always the same bias, but they have a tendency, right, towards some biases and towards maybe making the average of a bias and showing the biases that usually when you analyze these biases the language models have are biases that are those that belong to the most powerful social groups. And that's instead of maybe thinking about removing these biases, we could think about how to represent different biases from different social groups inside these models, like Lina was saying, bringing the perspective of different cultures, for instance.
Okay, sorry if I sort of ask one more along the same lines. So just turning it around, since there is a perception that large language models have biases and they cannot be applied blindly to different scenarios, do you think there is a trepidation from fields such as the social sciences or digital humanities that there is a push of LLMs and AI being pushed into these areas, and if there is a pushback, and how should we sort of encourage them that this is a technology that can be used in those kind of fields as well?
So who wants to answer?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm well qualified to represent the fields you mentioned, but yeah, maybe just a personal anecdote. Yeah, I feel like just um, it seems like the remedy to a large number of these problems just seems to be like equal representation in terms of like data and being seen. I distinctly remember when I was in grad school several years ago, we were talking about how several of the Indian languages, for example, didn't have many of the strong models. And yeah, I think an interesting point came up, which is that even if we look at the input interfaces, for example, back then at least people would code switch, like people would use the English alphabet to write Indian languages when they talk. So a lot of the digital kind of data out there was actually represented in a different language. But it does seem like over time, I think I see, for example, like a lot of on YouTube, for example, there's a more and more support for like indigenous languages. So there's like comments and content in specific in those like alphabets themselves. So yeah, based on that, I think once you start like the flywheel, I think that leads to like better and better support and like more inclusivity. So yeah, I do feel like it's again like a constant conversation and just trying to make sure like everyone's been seen and represented and heard. So yeah, but I guess I am not well qualified to represent this area.
On the one hand, I definitely think that as we heard in one of the keynotes, it could be great to have more interaction with social sciences. Thinking about how LLMs are also getting into some domains related to social sciences, like education sciences. That's something that in particular worries me. I've seen teachers, so for the whole last year we work with high school teachers, and they feel a lot of pressure to be using this technology, to be teaching it to their students, and they don't have enough teacher training to even when they started the course to understand that these systems could show these kind of biases. They came with the idea that the technology was neutral. So throughout the course, they were surprised to find this. So I definitely agree that in this sense, we need a lot of education to before the system get into schools. I think in my personal perspective, there's no rush for these systems to get into schools. And we still don't know the best way or what's the impact they will have on the students themselves and on if they use them to do their homeworks, for instance. And one of the questions that teachers always ask is, how do I detect if the student used an LLM to answer the homework or not? I mean, they have a lot of worries and a lot of needs. And well, in order to be able to react to those needs, we need involvement of people from education sciences to collaborate with.
I'd just like to add that LLMs do also very good job. If I think of something like summarizing things or providing translation quickly, talking about impact of our field to the society and other fields, I think one aspect is that we should be proud and emphasize what can be sort of honestly be said, that it has a fairly good non-biased use, but I think that kind of honestly also requires not to oversell LLMs in a way that it is a solution to all the problems, and there we especially need to work more to understand better what are the properties of LLMs. Different already there is a lot of research showing how they actually react totally differently in generating responses. So I think we need to have more this kind of research, digging deeper into what are the possibilities that they offer and what are the properties which we can then apply and probably sort of counter attack. I think all the work on the sort of how the LLMs now, for instance, can use their adversarial reactions, how they can actually be vulnerable for malicious sort of attacks. I think that's one of the important things for this community to think about. The interaction between, say, HCI, as was yesterday mentioned, I think that is extremely important concerning how the users can actually see the potential of the sort of technology, and also what was mentioned yesterday in I think in the keynote or in the panel session was that the evaluation methods that have been used in HCI can be really useful, and I think that also sort of accords with what I was saying, or we were saying earlier, that we need to include their humans and the users into the loop to understand what are the possibilities in the society at the moment. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so since we're talking a lot about LLMs, there was a question which was upvoted quite a bit, was that is traditional NLP dead in the era of LLMs? Maybe Kiran can start us off.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a provocative question. Yeah, I in my experience, what I feel is that I think there's a twofold change. One is that there were like existing ways to do things, and then there were some things which just weren't possible in the previous way of doing things. So I do feel that with the advent of LLMs, there's been a huge kind of unleashing of all the latent demand for things that weren't possible. And I just read the question, it perhaps asked in the context of named entity recognition. So I really enjoyed the keynote yesterday by Professor Yana, where she's just like kind of sharing some funny anecdotes about how like names can be so hard to disambiguate and like whether they refer to the same person or not. So yeah, I do feel there's a large chunk of such kind of latent demand which may be kind of addressed by just using LLMs. But there could also be like certain niche areas, like maybe in bibliometrics or taxes and trade regulations, or like medicine, for example, where I think there's still some scope, or there's still some requirement for making sure that like handcrafting or building systems which are doing very well for that specific use case. So yeah, I feel like definitely there's been a great impact, but there's still some ways to go, and there's still some kind of the last mile gap in several areas where there's like a lot of work that remains to be done. Yeah.
Well, here also I wanted to bring the multimodality to the topic, because in particular this question was related to name entity recognition. I think it's not dead, it's being transformed, and from my perspective, that I've always worked more on multimodality, I think it's interesting how these two tasks are getting closer. The name entity recognition and the resolution of referent expression into pictures, and really so a named entity is something that like a proper name or a particular region, but when you extend that to any way of referring to an object in the real world, there is still a lot of room for improvement. In fact, I was in the multimodality session, and they were working on images in which people are asking questions about a particular region in that image. So they were zooming in that part and zooming in different parts of the picture until they got to a part where they could actually answer the question. But then I was imagining if that question had a reference to some landmark that was out of the zoom region, then that approach would fail, for instance, and the relational referent expression, the referent expressions that refer to several objects in order to identify an object, are really not a solved problem. So I think it's not that these problems are dead, it's just they are getting more interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the great benefits of this huge sort of impact that has been on the community, making LLM sort of more widely known, even though the research has been going on for several decades. Is that it also brings us some important questions about what is it like to be humans, and how we humans actually use language, and what are the important aspects, how we communicate. It seems to me that it makes it more explicit and brings out certain questions like these interesting things about how we use proper names, and how the name entity recognition takes place. Those are not just problems for LLMs, but we as humans all the time encounter issues where we don't exactly know what the other person is referring to. And I think in that sense, I would like to emphasize again the fact that many of the issues in language is resolved through interaction. So it's not just kind of a one-shot process where in the very first sort of solution has to be the correct and truthful, but we may need some kind of a longer process included, where we want to compare that the first sort of option with some others, and see what actually fits best to the context. So in that sense, context is important to take into account, and where this particular task is being applied, because the interaction between what is good and useful and sort of correct is very much related to that. But yeah, I think there are a lot of interesting things coming up.
Before moving to the next question, I want to say something regarding these old-fashioned solutions or old-fashioned name entity recognition. Or we can still use them because we cannot use LLMs for everything. It's not sustainable. I mean, it's very expensive in many ways. So maybe we can also educate people to say if your text is very simple, maybe you have these sort of models that are smaller and cheaper and you can use them.
Yes, thanks for bringing this in. I think that is extremely important, that we need sort of hybrid solutions. I don't think that LLMs as such are a solution to everything, and if we have already working technology, so why not use that if it seems sort of good solution. And the thing that I think here we need to think about is exactly where the LLMs would make the sort of added value for using. So maybe named entity recognition is not the task where LLMs can improve any performance, but it may be that it has a very important and sort of valuable contribution to more sort of language-related creative aspects, but we need to sort of have some, how would I say, self-reflection. What is it that we want to use LLMs, where they are actually good and make the impact? So that's exactly what we are asking about. What is the added value of using them? And just before I give the floor to others, I think that's also important thing you mentioned about the expensiveness of using LLMs. I just read a news where actually I think it was Microsoft chair who has sort of given interaction sort of interview saying that all these data centers, they are so much energy consuming sort of enterprises that it's not necessarily useful to bring and go towards that. So we need some local solutions using smaller models and local processing. And in that, actually, these old-fashioned technologies can also be helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with just like kind of evaluation. So yeah, maybe just a quick thought is that I think the field is moving so quickly that people have not had the time to just take a deep breath and analyze where exactly would you want to use. Something general purpose like large language models or something specialized. Yeah, I do feel, I think in terms of like the cost, definitely if we're talking about single use cases, it may make sense to use specialized models. But I think when it comes to several such use cases, there's also the toil of actually maintaining and deploying each individual model. And I think that's part of the kind of appeal for why a lot of the use cases, I think it's just like very easy to hit an API endpoint or just go onto a chat window to get an answer as opposed to having specialized models do special things. But yeah, I think when the dust settles, or maybe I think the community finds it worthwhile to actually do a thorough accounting of where it makes sense to use the LLMs or where it makes sense to use like smaller specialized models. Yeah.
Yeah, and related to all this, I do hope that these kind of conferences accept more papers that take hybrid approaches and that take efficiency seriously. I think this is a very important problem. In particular, bigger and bigger data centers are being built. And this touches me very close because near where I grew up in Patagonia in Argentina, they are building a huge data center. And it's not clear what's the environmental impact that it will have and the impact that it will have also on the energy, on the cost of energy locally. And this comes in a context in which regions like Arizona in the United States and also the Netherlands had stopped the construction of data centers. So data centers now are moving more to the global south. And so I do hope that there is more funding for research for efficient models and that the conference take this into account when deciding which papers to accept in the future.
So,
Yeah, I think if the audience in the room, if you would like a burning question to be answered, you can upvote the ones on Slido. Or if there's some burning questions in the room, we can take some from the audience.
Check. Yeah. Hey, hi. Thanks for the amazing panel session, by the way. But my question is more around how we utilize LLMs in the industry. So there's a push in the industry to use off-the-shelf LLMs rather than building your own. So how important is it to balance our research efforts towards building solutions around off-the-shelf LLMs than tinkering around within the LLMs?
Again, I think that's a great question. And I'm going to just uh, escape from it by saying it depends. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel it kind of comes down to a bunch of factors, like of having ease of deployment, cost, and control and privacy. Yeah, I do feel like for certain critical applications, it might make sense to have full control over the end-to-end pipeline of where you source the data from, what kind of data is fed in, and be able to account for quality at the various stages. But at the same time, that's also not something that's accessible to a lot of teams starting up. So yeah, I think it's definitely a difficult question, but I do feel like there's place for both. I think just because the frontier LLMs keep getting stronger and stronger, it should not move the conversation away from others. It should not kind of raise the barrier to entry for the others so high that they're not able to compete. I think it should still be accessible for people to have more control over the models that they are having to work with. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you that this is a really hard question. I know of some intermediate solutions of publicly hosted language models that can be used and shared by different people. It depends a lot on the kind of, as you mentioned, the kind of privacy that you need because, well, in particular, the kind of services that I know about, they say, okay, this is, we have very little people working on maintaining these servers. We cannot ensure that they are not going to get hacked, so you don't, if you data is really sensitive, so you need to take that into account when you decide which is your provider for hosting your language model. But I don't think that the only options are commercial models like API, like for big tech and or hosting your own model. So these other services are an option too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of countries have actually common sort of efforts to build open data sources and models. I know that, for instance, in Japan, there is a huge project which involves many universities and research institutes, and they also have kind of cutting-edge research concerning how to use it locally, not just using cloud services. So to answer your question, I think it also depends on what we want to use these LLMs. Maybe some companies have their own sort of business interests to cover, and that sort of dictates how they want to use and sort of take their businesses forward. So it's probably question about individual cases than rather making some general use.
Thank you. I think that Sebastian, will you confirm it's time to finish now? Yeah. So now Sebastian will officially close the industry track. We will reorganize the room. Thank you very much for the great panel, and thank you, Soprano.